The Marvel Cinematic Universe is approaching its 20th anniversary and has brought hundreds of characters to the screen. Some have shined much more than in their comic book versions, with the best example being Iron Man. While others, even though they're iconic in the comics, have become mere jokes in the movies and series where they sometimes appear. The character remains interesting, sometimes even original, but in any case, for us comic book readers, it's still a disappointment. And that's exactly the topic we're going to discuss today. A special feature with 10 legendary characters from the comics, but whom the Marvel Cinematic Universe has made bland, forgettable, and sometimes even detestable. And you'll see, Marvel really has a talent for betraying its original works, to the point where it makes us want to eat our comics. This problem often affects the villains, like the Mandarin, Iron Man's greatest enemy, or Taskmaster, the formidable mentor of all the supervillains in the comics. But not only them. I'm also thinking of She-Hulk, who was completely butchered in a series that absolutely didn't understand the character at all, even though she's one of Marvel's best female characters. Anyway, you get the idea with these few examples that aren't even on the list, which shows just how much damage the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done. Alright, let's get started. You're with Kevin Bukart, your favorite theorist from your favorite Deus Ex Machina. Opening credits. Let's start this top 10 with Ant-Man, the Unstable Genius. Let's start with a hero who isn't a total failure, but is clearly underused in the comics as a secondary hero. But above all, his main version isn't Scott Lang, but Hank Pym. He's a pioneer, a genius scientist, simply one of the founders of the Avengers. But in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he mostly becomes a comic relief, often relegated to the background in the major storylines of the saga. The choice of Scott Lang as the main wearer of the Ant-Man suit, played by Paul Rudd, clearly comes from Marvel's desire to offer an accessible, light-hearted, family-friendly, and funny hero. The complete opposite of what Hank is, and in this regard, Rudd works perfectly, but by trying so hard to make him a likable character, we've lost what's essential. A true dramatic evolution, strong stakes, and character depth. Even in his own trilogy, Scott Lang often seems passive. He endures events, looks back at the past, and ends up solving problems almost by accident without ever truly driving the story. The first Ant-Man, originally an Edgar Wright project, had an original tone, but his departure led to a conventional film, and the sequels never really managed to get things back on track. Ant-Man and the Wasp is completely overshadowed by Infinity War, and Quantumania, which was supposed to usher in the Kang era, is a critical, visual, and narrative failure. I'm warning you, this film is still quite present. After 3 movies, Ant-Man still hasn't found his place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's neither a leader, nor a moral pillar, nor a scientific genius, he's just there. Often funny, sometimes useful, but never essential, and that's really the problem. Even his role in the events is unclear in Civil War. He's there for fan service and a few jokes, but remains a background character in Endgame. He may have the idea of time travel through the quantum realm, but it's Tony Stark who makes it happen. He mainly serves as comic relief, and you could almost say that the rat is more important than he is in the end. And yet, with his size-changing powers and his knowledge of the quantum realm, he could have become a key asset to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's all the more frustrating because there was a much stronger alternative. Hank Pym in the comics is a complex human character, often struggling with himself. For example, he's the one who creates Ultron. He's a brilliant but unstable man, capable of both the worst and the best. His arc could have brought adult themes like scientific responsibility, technological excess, mental health, and redemption. He could have stood as one of the pillars of the Marvel Cinematic Universe just like Tony Stark or Bruce Banner, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe didn't want that. By sidelining him, they deprived themselves of his conflicts with Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division, his regrets with Janet, and his complex relationship with Hope. Or even his need to prove that he still has it, that he helped create it, and no, the studio preferred to make him an old retired mentor. Probably to avoid having to deal with the darker aspects of his past, especially his domestic violence, or having to introduce another genius archetype like Steve Jobs. As a result, they played it safe. With Scott, the second Ant-Man in the comics, a former thief who turned his life around, a single father, a more endearing, feel-good hero, but also much less deep. Same criticism for the Wasp. Janet is also reduced to an older figure, even though she's an incredible character. In the comics, she's a founding member of the Avengers. She's the one who gives them their name, for example. Not to mention how she's written in Quantumania, which is a total disgrace. Moon Knight, the Fist of Khonshu. In the comics, Moon Knight is one of the darkest and most complex heroes in the Marvel Universe. But the Disney Plus series has considerably weakened him without really doing him justice. In the comics, Mark Spector, a former soldier and mercenary, was left for dead and revived by the Egyptian god Khonshu, becoming his representative on Earth. So far, that's accurate, but he's not just a classic hero. He's a man struggling with dissociative identity disorder, in which several distinct personalities coexist. Stephen Grant, a wealthy man, Jake Lockley, a taxi driver, and Mr. Knight, a detective in a suit. His identities aren't just simple facades, but real fragments of his psyche, born from his traumas and a particularly difficult past. But what really sets him apart in the comics is that Moon Knight is also known for his extreme violence. He's not afraid to be brutal or ruthless and fully embraces his anti-hero side while maintaining a strong connection to the Egyptian mystical universe. He is the embodiment of vengeance. He's a troubled, often isolated character who operates in the shadows and doesn't strive to be a perfect hero. He's often compared to Batman, but on the Marvel side and much more hardcore, which makes his relationships with other heroes often very complicated. But in the Disney Plus series, all of that has been largely toned down. The violence is almost always cut from the screen, with blackouts whenever Mark gets into a more intense fight. The dark scenes are avoided to keep a more family-friendly tone, and the character's psychological depth is only barely touched upon. The series does try to address his trauma and multiple identities, but it does so too quickly, in just 6 episodes, without really taking the time to explore what he's going through. Choosing the main villain is another sign of this. Many fans would have preferred Raoul Bushman, the true iconic antagonist of Moon Knight, whose inclusion could have made the story more personal, more intense, but above all, much more faithful to the source material, making everything much more violent. For many, Moon Knight clearly deserved an R-rated film, darker, with a simpler and more direct narrative. And even though Oscar Isaac delivers an excellent performance, the character seems to have been constantly rewritten. When Mark finally starts to break away from Steven to move forward, he comes back for him almost immediately, as if his whole journey was for nothing. Mark's mental struggle, which is at the very heart of the character in the comics, is pushed into the background. Moon Knight is now very bland, no longer really resembling the one fans know and love. It's a series that should have been much closer to the themes of Punisher than to the ones that were actually explored. But well, we're hoping for a complete overhaul of the character for the press, Secret Wars, and potentially the Midnight Suns. Guys, give us the real Moon Knight, who is actually one of my favorite characters. Number 8, Ultron, the evil AI. Well, what you need to understand is that Ultron in the comics is one of the most formidable villains in the entire universe. In Marvel, he's an artificial intelligence created by Hank Pym, the first Ant-Man. Endowed with an evolving consciousness, a god complex, and a deep hatred for his creator, he keeps coming back in increasingly perfected and ever more dangerous forms. He creates vision, massacres entire populations, takes control of countries, and even pushes the Avengers to the brink. Just the story arc alone. Age of Ultron in the comics is much darker and more violent than Joss Whedon's version. The story begins after the disaster. Ultron has already conquered Earth, major cities like New York are in ruins, superheroes are being hunted, and humanity is almost wiped out. Ultron rules from the future, controlling the present through a network of drones and robotic sentinels. The heroes who are still alive, Spider-Man, Captain America, Wolverine, are desperate and forced to live in hiding, just trying to survive. He's not just a villain, he's a concept. The fear of losing control over what we create. The anxiety of technology turning against humanity. He is cold, methodical, unstoppable, but in the Marvel Cinematic Universe sometimes he's reduced to a robot who cracks jokes. He is created not by Hank Pym, but by Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, using Loki's scepter containing the Mind Stone. The basic idea isn't bad, nor is the Protector concept gone wrong, but its execution is sloppy. Barely born, he decides that humanity must be eradicated. There's no development, no build-up of tension. He goes from zero to apocalypse without us really understanding why. Well, discovering Twitter could have the same effect on any of us, and from that point on, the movie never gives him a single real victory. He's chased, beaten, and humiliated by the Avengers from start to finish, and we never have any doubt about the final outcome. Even worse, his behavior constantly swings between threats and humor. He sings creepy nursery rhymes, then cracks jokes worthy of Stark, which totally kills his aura. The tone of the movie never does him justice. Where we expected a terrifying villain, living up to what the trailer promised, we got a sarcastic robot who's never scary, neither by his actions nor his ideas. Thanks, Whedon. Even Vision's creation, pivotal in the comics, is reduced to a failed experiment here. Vision isn't a tragedy or dilemma for Ultron, just a tool lost. As for his planetary threat, it's largely underused. Sokovia is partly destroyed, sure, but everyone is saved, and in the end, he barely killed anyone. Even though James Spader delivers a memorable vocal performance, it's let down by writing that refuses to embrace the scale of a true tragic villain. Ultron could have been a central antagonist like Thanos, spread across several movies, a scourge that evolves over time. Instead, he becomes a simple, almost forgettable parenthesis between Loki and Thanos, a poorly balanced end of Act 2 boss that you almost want to skip. And not everything is worthless in the lessons this movie can convey, it's just not the massive warning that the comics offered. Where Ultron is a bloodthirsty killer, and that's why he's only 8th in this ranking, but don't worry, Ultron should be back in the Vision series. And we hope that Marvel will really do justice to the character this time. Number 7. Odin, the father of all in the Marvel Comics universe, Odin Weakened. The All-Father is one of the most powerful, complex, and influential beings in the cosmic pantheon. Father of Thor, Loki, and Hela, king of Asgard, he rules not only his kingdom but also maintains the balance of the 9 realms. In the comics, Odin is not just a ruler, he is a formidable conqueror, a wise man, a force of nature. His power surpasses that of most Norse gods and even many others. He draws his power from the Odin Force, an immeasurable divine energy that allows him to manipulate reality. To stop time, to create or destroy planets, to repel threats like Surtur or Galactus, and even to delay Ragnarok, the apocalypse of the Norse gods. Even beyond this raw power, Odin is also a tragic figure. He carries a heavy past of war, conquests, and morally grey decisions. He embodies both the burden of power, the loneliness of a king, and the political consequences of his choices on his own children. As a father, he is far from monolithic, authoritative, harsh, but also protective and wise. He imposes a model that Thor tries to follow and that Loki violently rejects. Unfortunately, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Odin is a deeply weakened figure, poorly utilized, and even largely wasted. Despite Anthony Hopkins' masterful performance, the character never received the attention or development he deserved. From his very first appearance, he is already reduced to the figure of a tired old king. He talks more than he acts, and his immense power, which is at the heart of his legend, is never actually shown on screen. The Odin Force, on the other hand, is barely mentioned. It is never visualized, never utilized. He doesn't take part in any major battles, doesn't appear during the great wars of the universe, and dies without ever having used his full power. And what's shocking is this huge gap between what he's supposed to represent and what we see in the MCU. Odin seems almost human. He's tired, confused, often absent during key moments. He appears, gives an order, a prophecy, or some advice, and then disappears. This passive role is wasted on a character meant to be at the top of the divine hierarchy. We're discussing the father of everything, and while his greatness is referenced, we never witness it. We know little about his thoughts, dilemmas, or emotions. Even his relationship with Ella, which could have been Thor Ragnarok's emotional core, is barely addressed. Plus, his power level is very inconsistent. In the comics, he can resurrect the dead and hold back entire armies. But in the movies, he's weakened. As if Marvel Studios was afraid to take on such a colossal character. Marvel can only make up for this insult by giving Thor the All-Father power, making him the father of all. I have a feeling that's coming soon. Number 6, Adam Warlock the Mage. The arrival of Adam Warlock in the Marvel Cinematic Universe should have been an event. In the comics, he may not be as popular as Spider-Man or Iron Man, but he plays an absolutely central role in some of the greatest cosmic sagas. A complex hero, yet so tormented, a galactic philosopher, Warlock is a unique figure in the Marvel Universe. But in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the way he's handled honestly leaves a bitter taste on screen. He lives up to neither his origins nor his potential. And here's why. In the comics, Adam Warlock is intimately connected to the entire Infinity storyline. Holder of the Soul Stone, leader of several cosmic crusades, opponent and later judge of Thanos, he's at the heart of events like Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, and even Infinity Crusade. He even temporarily wields the Infinity Gauntlet. He's an almost divine character, in constant introspection, who weighs every action with a higher sense of morality. He's the exact opposite of his Marvel Cinematic Universe character, which makes sense since his role was in the Thanos-focused Marvel Cinematic Universe saga. But Marvel Studios made the strange choice to introduce him only afterwards, in a 30-second film that no longer has any connection to the Infinity Stones. His absence in Infinity War and Endgame had already frustrated quite a few fans, but discovering him only in Guardians 3, without any real connection to the main plot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, only makes that frustration worse. And from his very first scene, James Gunn's Warlock is puzzling, and not in a good way. Presented as a living weapon under the orders of a capricious priestess, he is catapulted into the story. Without any build-up, without subtlety, and especially at 100 depths. His cosmic power is barely hinted at. His intelligence overshadowed by a childish, almost foolish behavior, always missing the point. He literally spends his time running into walls, obeying without thinking. While the comics offered a solitary, almost religious thinker, the movie gives us a sloppy, comedic, and frankly secondary version. And it's not just a writing problem, it's also an incomplete adaptation in the comics. The connection between Adam Warlock and the High Evolutionary is fundamental. He is literally his creator, and all their interactions revolve around the creator-creature conflict. Here, this link is dismissed in only 2 sentences. Warlock is just a pawn with no real attachment, no significant confrontation, and that's maybe the worst part. They could have taken Adam Warlock out of the movie and it wouldn't have changed a thing. He doesn't move the story forward, he doesn't bring any dramatic tension, important revelations, or even real development for the other characters. He's just one more obstacle, and his transition from being a threat to becoming a member of the team is completely rushed in a post-credits scene. But this botched handling seems to be a symptom of a chaotic production. Let's remember that the film was put on hold after James Gunn was fired before being restarted. And it's possible that the original intention to strongly integrate Warlock was completely diluted over time. Gunn admitted he didn't know what to do with Warlock and was forced to include the famous post-credits scene in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. But all is not lost. The character is young, still malleable, and his future remains open. As part of the Guardians team, he could evolve in future phases with a new tone, director, and approach. Knowing the Marvel Cinematic Universe's renewal will focus more on the galactic phase, I recommend playing the Guardians of the Galaxy game to better understand the character. In this case, it shows a Warlock truer to his origins. In short, for now, the conclusion is clear. Adam Warlock was introduced too late, poorly written, poorly used, stripped of his substance, a character of enormous depth turned into a simple running gag. Before moving on, don't forget that the best way to support my work is to subscribe. Yes team, that's the key to everything. But also to use YouTube's new tool and boost this video if you like it. It helps me get noticed by the algorithm, costs nothing, and reduces the chances of me disappearing from social media one day. Oh yes, it can happen, so if you like my work, you know what you have to do. Number 5, The Incredible Hulk. Alright, now we're entering the top 5 and clearly things are getting serious. The character of Hulk is an iconic figure in comics. Marvel is known for his colossal strength, but especially for his psychological complexity, his inner conflict, and his tragic side. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, however, this depth has been largely sacrificed. Instead, we have a watered-down version that today disappoints a lot of fans. One of the most common criticisms is the lack of real development on screen. First, because the monster's screen time is ridiculous, but also because of his incomprehensible change. Between Infinity War and Endgame, where Hulk goes from a character in crisis who even refuses to reappear to Smart Hulk, a fusion with Bruce Banner, and this fundamental change, we never see it. The Russo brothers admitted they weren't especially interested in Hulk. And I have to say, it feels criminal. He gets beaten without glory by Thanos at the very beginning of Infinity War, and then he disappears, completely sidelined from the action for the rest of the movie. And in Endgame, he's there, but in brain mode, used for his intellect, not for his strength, and even then, in the end, he doesn't solve anything by himself and constantly needs Rocket and Tony. His scenes are mainly in comedic moments, and he doesn't have any memorable heroic moments, no revenge, no power-up. For once, he's really sidelined at the very moment when all the other heroes are shining. And at the same time, Bruce Banner in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has lost the intensity that made him so powerful in the comics. In Edward, Norton played a tormented, anxious scientist searching for a cure. Mark Ruffalo, on the other hand, takes a much lighter approach and has left all that behind. It's a different approach, of course, but it erases all the dramatic aspects. The inner struggle against the beast is replaced by jokes. Yet this inner conflict, a bit like with Moon Knight, is essential to the character, and without it, Hulk isn't interesting. The Marvel Cinematic Universe chose comedy over tragedy. Accessibility to complexity, that's the whole problem. The duality between Banner and Hulk, between the man, could have been the heart of the character, but it's barely touched on. After Avengers 1, it's rarely mentioned, which disappoints fans since it's an interesting theme. Plus, his power is handled inconsistently in the comics. Hulk is among the strongest in the Marvel Universe, and his strength grows as he gets angrier. He can destroy planets, jump from one continent to another, survive in space, and regenerate from fatal injuries. So, of course, in the movies you can't show everything, but here they went a bit too far. Smart Hulk who struggles to flip a car. Seriously, his power is no longer spectacular and becomes interchangeable with other heroes. Where he should have remained unique in the comics, each version of Hulk reflects a trauma. All of them represent a facet of Banner's broken psyche, but again, the studios preferred a simplified, one-dimensional interpretation. We skim over it, and even the human relationships that could have grounded him are absent. Betty Ross, his great love, disappears after The Incredible Hulk. Don't bring up the $2 million cameo in Captain America 4, it'll only upset us. Rick Jones, his loyal comic friend, isn't even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As a result, Bruce has no close circle, no personal world. Barton has his family, Peter has his friends, Ant-Man has his daughter, but Bruce has nothing. And even the attempt at a romance with Black Widow, introduced in Age of Ultron, falls flat and is dropped really quickly. Oh, and also, they got rid of the purple shorts. In short, a wasted character who has been sidelined since Age of Ultron 11 years ago. Number 4, mental organism designed only for killing the leader of I. The introduction of mental organism designed only for killing in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, was highly anticipated. Well, at least not for me anyway. And yet it turned into a real disaster, to the point that today, the character has almost become the symbol of the tough times Marvel has gone through in phases 4 and 5. In the movie, mental organism designed only for killing is a direct continuation of Darren Cross, also known as Yellow Jacket, the antagonist from the first Ant-Man, 2015. Once he arrived in the realm, he was transformed into this improbable creature. And while you can understand the idea, it creates a connection with the first movie, avoids introducing a new character, and justifies his strange appearance, the result is completely off the mark compared to the comics. Mental organism designed only for killing is George Tarleton, a technician from the criminal scientist organization. Advanced idea mechanics transformed during a mutagenic experiment meant to increase his intelligence. He becomes an oversized brain, unable to stand, and forced to move around in a sort of throne. He represents the Doomsday Chair, the ultimate symbol of advanced idea mechanics, an organization made up of scientists, evil geniuses. And in the movie, it almost pains me to talk about it. On top of being absolutely ridiculous, he's stupid, making one absurd decision after another until a grotesque sacrifice. He's not a strategist, let alone a genius. He's ridiculed, reduced to being Kang's lackey, right up to that scene where you see his butt. No, that's too much. It's just too much. And let's be clear. In the comics, mental organism designed only for killing would never let himself be treated like that. He's the one who literally takes control, overthrows his creators, kills the supreme scientist, takes over advanced idea mechanics, and becomes a megalomaniac tyrant. Feared and respected, he faces Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, the X-Men, not Ant-Man, in a carefully crafted battle setting. And what makes his case even worse in Quantumania is that we could have had wrinkled, damaged, unsettling skin that looks like a brain, just like in the comics. Disgusting, almost frightening. And instead, we get a cop, a Snapchat filter face, and a design that looks more like something from Puss in Boots or Bella Ramsey than a real artistic choice. When he wears his golden helmet, it's fine, but he doesn't wear it often, and without it, things get awkward. M.O.O. usually has mental powers, telekinesis, telepathy, and mind control. In the movies, he fires neon pink lasers that can't even harm a rock. And what about his character growth? It fits in 3 lines of dialogue. What's the deal with his attitude? Why are you doing this? I don't know. So stop being a loser. And suddenly the guy switches sides. He sacrifices himself, as if we just witnessed a moving transformation. Such emotional depth, an unforgettable moment, a magical interlude, a monster of charisma. No, really, nothing works in this movie. It's absurd. But hey, if only it were the worst. Because now we're starting the top 3, and here comes quite a specimen at number 3, the Super Skrull, champion of Skrullos. Alright, now we need to understand why the Super Skrull is one of the biggest failures in Marvel's history. For that, let's go back to the basics. The Super Skrull was created in 1963 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. He is part of the shape-shifting alien race known as the Skrulls, already feared for their ability to copy anyone's appearance. But Klurta is different. Yes, that's his name, and I can't pronounce it. He has been genetically enhanced and possesses the combined powers of the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards' elasticity, Ben's strength, Sue's force fields, and Johnny's flames. A creation of the Skrull Empire to directly confront the Fantastic Four after a crushing failure during their first attempt to invade Earth. And very quickly, Klurta becomes an iconic antagonist, facing not only Marvel, Thor, or Spider-Man, but also experiencing moments of redemption. Yes, since the Skrull Empire threatened his family after his repeated failures, he ended up turning against them several times. He teams up with Nova in Annihilation and aids heroes in Secret Invasion. That shows the show's general faithfulness. He faces Thanos and even ends up leading the Skrull Empire, hoping to make it less belligerent. Well, there were other Super Skrulls created later to combine different powers as needed, but the original Super Skrull is the Skrull's ultimate answer to Earth's superheroes. There's a real logic behind his creation. A simple character, easy to adapt. Marvel scores an open goal. They managed to make him one of the worst characters in history. In the series Secret Invasion, we meet Gravik, an original character played by Kingsley Ben-Adir, a radicalized Skrull, a war orphan taken in by Nick Fury in his youth, to whom he promised a home, a promise never kept. Gravik, feeling betrayed, leads extremist Skrulls, who believe their survival requires taking over Earth. Well, honestly, it doesn't start off that badly. It's consistent with the Marvel Cinematic Universe lore, and it might even lead to something interesting. The only problem is, you might be wondering what this has to do with the Super Skrull. The answer is simple: nothing. From the very first episode, with the Moscow attack, all the way to the last one, they try to provoke a nuclear war between the United States of America and Russia. The idea is to make humans kill each other so that the Skrulls, who are immune to radiation, can take their place. They infiltrate governments, manipulate decisions. Up to this point, okay, why not? But then Gravik wants to enhance himself, to gain powers to face the Avengers. Except that no Avengers appear in the series, just Nick Fury saying, "I'll handle this myself." Like, excuse me, who are you, bro? Actually, there's no coherence in this series. And then, why not just ask Rhodes to directly bomb Russia, or to turn into priests? Originally, that was the plan over 5 episodes, but Gravik gets sidetracked in a pointless subplot, and it isn't finished yet. Gravik already has the powers of Extremis, Cull, Obsidian, Frost Giants, and Groot by the 2nd episode, so technically he's already a Super Skrull. Probably even stronger than most of the Avengers, but no, he needs more. He wants the harvest, the DNA of all the Avengers collected from the endgame battlefield. But to fight who? At this point, I have to admit I no longer understand his actions or the series. Which brings us to this disastrous finale. Gravik gets the powers of all the Avengers, but he's too lazy to move. Fury from the machine, except Fury isn't really Fury. Gaia gets all the powers, leading to a final fight between 2 Super Skrulls with tons of special effects as they use dozens of powers, including Captain Marvel's and Bonnie Mo's, plus others. An ADN transfusion, and boom, you can manipulate the energy of an Infinity Stone without any warm-up or training. Alright, it works, because basically the point of creating the Super Skrull is to challenge the heroes by fighting them with their own powers. That's the concept, that's actually the whole appeal of the character. But in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there are no heroes facing him, no threat greater than him. There's nothing to overcome, nothing to prove, no dramatic build-up. In short, it's just a waste, kind of a no. I mean, it's like if they put Taskmaster in a movie where he faces a hero without any powers. Or like if they put Gore in a movie without any gods, or Thanos in a movie where there's no rivalry, or Galactus to face me. Me, for example, you get it, with Secret Invasion. Marvel had a penalty kick with no goalkeeper, and they managed to score an own goal, number 2, Gore, the God Butcher. Well, now you get it, we're ramping things up and it's personal. This is the day Marvel decided to betray me. In the comics, Gore is a tragic character with a devastating past. He comes from a desert planet. He saw his whole family die, and the gods he prayed to did nothing. They were absent, indifferent, and worse. They even showed up to mock him while his daughter was dying in his arms. From there, his deep hatred for the gods is born, as he sees them as corrupt, useless, and unworthy of their power. But one day, he gets his hands on the Necrosword, a divine soul created by Null, the god of the symbiotes. This sword grants him immense cosmic power, and with it, he embarks on a bloody crusade across the cosmos. He becomes the butcher of gods, slaughtering the deities he holds responsible for the suffering of the universe, and in his mind, it's nothing but justice. A run through time where he faces himself. A wrong young Thor of the Avengers is the god of all. A wrong from the future, persecuted by Gore, who took everything from him. Even with all 3, they barely stand a chance, since Gore is far too powerful for all the gods in the cosmos. Gods he has enslaved to build a bomb that will annihilate all the gods who have ever existed or will exist. Throughout time, people talk about this kind of guy, and to play this tortured character, Christian Bale seemed like the perfect casting choice. The acclaimed actor, known especially for his role as Batman in The Dark Knight, had everything needed to bring gravity to this role. And yet, the movie Thor, Love and Thunder doesn't deliver on any of its promises. First of all, Gore's look is light years away from the terrifying aura he usually gives off. Then, the heart of his drama, his pain, his anger, his past, is barely touched upon. His mission, his crusade against the gods, his murders are all overshadowed. No bloodbath in any pantheon, and the gods are just partying in their palace. In the end, his quest boils down to kidnapping children. Wow, terrifying. What makes it even more disappointing is that in the comics, Gore isn't just a villain. He represents a powerful critique of the gods' passivity. He questions faith, the place of deities, and the meaning of existence. His actions trigger a deep existential crisis in Thor, which continues long after the villain's death. It's Gore, indirectly, who is behind the unworthy Thor storyline. In that one, Thor becomes unworthy to lift Mjolnir after hearing Nick Fury whisper to him, "Gore was right." This is crucial. It questions the very moral legitimacy of the gods themselves, and this depth was never incorporated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe because of absurd narrative choices. The return of Mjolnir out of nowhere, the Council of Gods, a parody, a gathering of clowns. And above all, the tone of the movie, way too light, way too comedic, way too Taika Waititi. Even though Gore's story calls for tragedy, pain, or darkness. Basically, the movie was supposed to be Oppenheimer, and it turned out to be Barbie. In short, a villain for a movie that should have been a bomb. And we know it's probably the only version of Gore we'll get in live action. So, for me, he totally deserves his place. It's a huge waste. The movie did pretty well at the box office, yes, but in terms of reviews, it's a disaster. Even Chris Hemsworth admitted that the tone wasn't right for this kind of story. And he even wanted to completely give up the character after this movie. And Waititi will probably never work with Marvel again. He was just way too much on autopilot, so everyone must have had a lot of fun on set. The problem is that no one really questioned themselves. I dare you to find a comic book fan who enjoyed this movie. No, the creators are just criminals. It's excessive. Gore again, another enemy sacrificed on the altar of the Marvel formula and the disasters of the worst era of Phase 4. Number 1, Kang the Conqueror. How could I not end this list with my biggest heartbreak of recent years? It's hard not to see Kang the Conqueror as one of the biggest narrative wastes in the entire history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Knowing his immense potential in the comics, Nathaniel Richards is far more than a typical villain. He's a nearly immortal master of time, lost in timelines, armed with futuristic technology, and present everywhere in the universe. Marvel, his past and future versions, Ramatut, Immortus, Iron Lad, the Scarlet Centurion, keep resurfacing again and again. Kang is an enemy with 1,000 faces, each with his own era, his own motivations, his own philosophy. The very existence of the character raises powerful themes: free will, the time loop, the struggle against oneself. He is a man at war with his own destiny, trapped in a cycle of conquests, regrets, and defeats. And above all, he is one of the most iconic enemies of the Avengers. And yet, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, all of that was swept under the rug, even though here, no one will question the removal of Jonathan Majors. We might be missing out on something that could have been masterful, because in Loki Season 1, the potential was there. The character of He Who Remains, portrayed with subtlety by Majors, embodied a tired, almost pacified version of Kang. A being who had tamed the chaos of the multiverse to impose the sacred timeline. And he very clearly warned that his death would lead to much worse variants, to a new multiversal war. It was powerful, it made sense, and it laid the foundation for an epic multiversal saga. That Kang wasn't just a villain, he was an idea. The idea that absolute order can become tyranny, but also a shield against the self-destruction of reality. And that's something Loki will fully understand in Season 2. Still delivering the best series in the Marvel Universe, and potentially one of the best series in recent years. But all this potential was betrayed in Quantumania, where Marvel reduced Kang to a banished dictator, exiled to the quantum realm and beaten by Ant-Man in a one-on-one and an army of ants. We keep repeating ourselves, we move on. And even if the character is the best aspect of the movie, that ending change at the last second is clearly cringe. But the real problem is more about the overall management of the multiverse saga. The Infinity Saga built up Thanos over 10 years, with post-credit scenes, the introduction, Infinity Stones, and well-placed hints. Here, Marvel forces Kang in all of a sudden, without any real setup, without building up tension. Even in Loki Season 2, several variants appear, but none of them become the true heart of the saga. And that's the absurd thing in the comics. Kang imposes his presence even when he's absent. He manipulates events from a distance, pulls the strings, and conquers entire eras. Even those variants are memorable, but in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Victor Timely isn't really convincing. We expected more. The Conqueror is swept aside too quickly, and the post-credits variants as well. It has to be said. One thing is that it was awkward. The character lacks a clear motivation. Thanos wanted to save the universe through genocide. Kang, on the other hand, it's just, I was banished, I want revenge, and not much more. His arc, if you can call it that, has no weight. He's neither inspiring nor terrifying. He's just carried by a really strong Jonathan Majors, who, in this case, really believed in it. He gave his all to the role, but lazy writing undermined his performance. That just came out, we could have made up for it through phases 5 and 6 with gradual development. But even if Kevin Feige tells us they had already planned this before the actor's legal case, obviously it sped up his removal. And here, where potentially a recast would have made perfect sense, especially for a multiversal character, Marvel just dropped it. Kang fell into limbo, considering he didn't have what it takes to be a villain on Thanos' level. But that, my friends, is more your fault than the character's. Yes, the most memorable version of the character is still He Who Remains from Loki Season 1. That's the real tragedy. Kang could have been much bigger than Thanos. He could have faced Reed Richards, his ancestor, in a strategic or family duel. Could he have been directly involved in a plot with the X-Men? He could have played with timelines, with our expectations, even with the very rules of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but no. What could have become the most iconic villain in the universe? Marvel has become a Reddit joke. A forgotten villain whose movie Avengers Kang Dynasty will never see the light of day. Instead, we'll get Doctor Doom, which might be great, that's true, but who else could dethrone Kang in this ranking? I hope not. Whatever happens, it will be something else, it will be different, and Kang will remain the biggest waste of Marvel Studios. But all is not lost. We can see it with Disney, who is trying to patch things up with Gina Carano. After his trial, just like they did before with Johnny Depp, it makes me think that Jonathan Major might get another chance someday. Why not a rehabilitation? Maybe an adaptation more centered around Kang, more ambitious, more faithful? The story isn't dead. I love this actor, and if you like this overview of wasted heroes and villains, I can make a part 2. Next, we'll find 10 characters who improved compared to the comics, and there are plenty. If you haven't seen a summer video, it's here. See you next week, and remember to stay curious. That's the secret to happiness. Bye.